Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
So as we heard in the epistle today, but this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or out of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound towards you, that you, always having all sufficiency in all things, may have an abundance for every good work. As it is written, he has dispersed abroad, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food, supply and multiply the seed that you have sown and increase the fruits of your righteousness, while you are enriched in everything for all liberality, which causes thanksgiving through us to God. So he's talking about good works, works of the kingdom, and of us giving of ourselves. And this, I think oftentimes we focus on stuff we've done wrong and not on the stuff that we haven't done that we could have. And the world would be a much better place if we were focusing on the stuff that we could have done, or that we could do, actually rather that we could do, so there's no regret. In a time, oftentimes we're too busy or we don't want the hassle, right? You know, we're walking down the grocery store aisle and there's a lady and she has two kids screaming in the cart and she tries to reach for something and something falls. You're late. You're just late. You can't stop, right? You're late. So you pass her by. And now God's going to ask you about that one. He's going to ask me about that one too. Because whatever we were running late for, guess what? We weren't really running late at all because we were meant to be there at that time. At that time, he put us there. So, little things like that throughout the day, and I'm telling you, there are so many things that we can do. And he's telling us to give of ourselves generously. Give of ourselves generously. Be serious Christians. Be serious Christians, not passive. Active, daily looking for ways to produce good that's never existed in the world before. Yes, little works of good. It is those little acts of kindness that subdue great evils, not big acts. And so, we turn to the gospel for today. And now it happened the day after that he went into a city called Nain, normally we say in English. And many of his disciples went with him in a large crowd. And when he came near the gate of the city, behold, a dead man was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Right? So this is it. She lost her husband, and now she's losing her only son. And a large crowd from the city was with her. And the Lord, as the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and he said to her, "Do not weep." And he came and he touched the open coffin. So it's interesting, the detail here. He didn't even touch the body. Right? So this is to show it was his very word. His word was enough. His word was enough to demonstrate that he was indeed the divine Son of God and that he was acting, the Creator. And so he touched just the coffin, and those who carried him came to a still. So they stood still, right? And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." So he who was dead sat up and began to speak. Now, I don't know about you, but I can imagine what the what the reaction was there, right? Some people probably were, especially, just like today where people are wishy-washy with their religion, it has been throughout all of history and our fallen nature. So There were a lot of people there who were like, had no time for God. They were just going to the funeral to, support the widow, and some of them just to look good, like they were carrying out their duty or whatever. And all of a sudden, this dead person sits up. I can just imagine the groan and the screams that probably happened there. But what St. Luke reports is what the people said. A great prophet has risen up among us, but the second one is the more important. God has visited his people. And that is what all these things that the Lord did in his earthly walk were about, to verify that indeed God has visited his people. Our world is in various messes, but ironically, various messes are also miraculously being cleaned up. I mean, if this thing happens in the Middle East, wow. I mean, if it sticks. However, there are more things to take care of in the world, like the tens of thousands of children from Ukraine who were abducted by the Russian Federation and sent to indoctrination camps. How many of you didn't know about this before I just said it? Yeah, that's right. 30-some thousand, and they're still ripped away from their parents, sent to indoctrination camps over the border in the Russian Federation. Now, here is how clueless Putin and, as I call them, the Putinists are. They release videos and pictures of these children thinking that was to be some sort of positive thing. So they're like, look at all these children we're educating, right? And the problem is, whoever Putin's PR guy is not too great, because the children look absolutely miserable. And some of them, they're crying. I'm like, yeah, they should have, hired someone for that, I think. But good for us, because now we know about it. The world knows about it from Russia. It's like not like they can accuse Ukraine of doctoring these photos and these videos. Of course, the Russian Federation pulled them, but they were out on the internet, and so but they were stolen from their families, right? Yeah, we still have work to do in the world, and we have so many of these things that still need correcting. That being said, we can do some things about that. I mean, we can bug our politicians and things like that. We can send letters, we can write and call things, but to change the world, we need to get a little closer to home. Imagine a world where everything we should do is something that we want to do, and everything that we want to do is something that we should do. I'm going to repeat that. Imagine a world where everything we should do is something that we want to do, and everything that we want to do is something that we should do. Where restraining appetites is pleasing to us. And restraining appetites doesn't just mean, eating a little less or whatever. It means lashing out. You want to, that's it. Your neighbor, you've had it with your neighbor, right? He's cut into your lawn too many times. You think he's trying to take your property or something. You have tongue lashing. No. And furthermore, we love as Americans to look back. In the third world, we have many first world problems here, right? Where we can get depressed over things and idle thoughts because we're not occupied with things all the day long and problems and correcting them and things like that as they are in, say, third world countries. But I'll tell you, this world would be a much better place if you and I and everyone who adheres to Christ focus on loving and living and investing and committing to the life that you have rather than the life that could have been or should have been, that is the secret to happiness, which is the secret to peace, godly happiness, godly joy. And just why do we have such a hard time doing it? Why? And that's not to say that we don't evolve in our life, of course. We do, right? Our life is a journey towards God. And so there's different, deviations in the path, but it always has to be the path, and God always has to be our fellow traveler. And when we depart from him, we're in trouble. So we evolve in our lives, and we have different stations in life. We're not all called to do the same job from, age 18 to retirement or whatever, right? But regardless of which station we're in, let us learn contentment and thanks and gratitude for the wonderful things we have, to look at them as wonderful things. The book of Hebrews says, keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, nor will I ever forsake you. That, my friends, if we had that on our mind as the most important thing in our lives, lots of problems would disappear. Another relevant verse from Ecclesiastes. It is better to be happy with what you have than to always want more and more. Always wanting more and more is useless. It is vain. It is like trying to catch the wind. So, with the widow of Nain, when I was reading this passage, I was thinking of children who go off to war. We think back to the world wars, but also Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, both times Afghanistan. And I thought about how this mother didn't have her husband anymore, so dad wasn't there. But mothers and fathers feel differently. And both are needed for balance. Right? So a son goes off to war, and a father might be, both parents might have some concern, but a father tends to be swelling with pride, right, for his son. The good kind, right? That his son is fighting evil, or daughter. And although the daughter, once we get into daughters in the military, I'm not going to get into it. So it'll be a mess. And don't talk to me after church about it. We'll say something. But the mother has a little bit different of a feelings. And all these people who say there's no difference between men and women, just absolute nonsense. Just absolute total nonsense. We know there is. And we need, and I thought about how, this widow who lost her son, Nain, must have felt. We see today these videos of literally mothers in these Islamic terrorist mothers who are literally throwing parties for their sons who blew themselves up and took others with them. Celebrating murder and self-murder. On the other hand, we don't want people to think that the only purpose of their sons being here is to just continue this earthly life. We are not here. It is not just to live because we all die anyway, right? It's to live well and to live godly as the first step in our journey of life. When the next step is, only God knows. When is the next step? to our deliverance from this body of death, as St. Paul says? We don't know that. All we need to know is we need to prepare for that moment, which I pray for everyone in this room is after a life well lived and faithfully lived. So, finally, I want to leave you with this. Our behavior on this earth, the Ten Commandments, and I was reflecting on this and how Moses threw down the Ten Commandments as a judgment on the children of Israel who rebelled against God and started worshiping false gods, and God restored the Ten Commandments. But guess what? Moses, it's not necessarily that God approved of Moses throwing them down, because Moses had to do a lot of fasting and praying for maybe what was a moment of a loss of temper, right? But publicly, God, because he gave Moses the authority, did judge the children of Israel at that time. And Moses did go up and re-receive the Ten Commandments. And I was thinking about how so many people just think that God makes up arbitrary rules, right? But they're not arbitrary. Murder, theft, adultery, hatching plots to get your neighbor's stuff, sacrificing other humans to different gods to appease them or to get something from them. These are all things that have happened down through human history and are still happening today. The Ten Commandments and all the other commandments are not about God picking, I want you to do this and being under control. God is simply laying out the consequences. The spiritual and social dynamics on earth are subject to limits built into the creation. The fabric of the universe, so to speak. God does not impose laws upon us. Instead, he just reveals to us the way to avoid ripping the fabric of the universe. But I call on you today that we do a little less ripping of the fabric of the universe, but also we have the power to repair the fabric of the universe that has been ripped. Let's look for little ways to do it, here and there. We're not going to raise a dead man out of a coffin, but we can raise people's spirits on a daily basis, even when we don't feel like it. Because guess what? That's what being faithful is. Even at times we don't feel like it, we still do the right thing, because we're still inheriting sons and daughters of God's kingdom. And whether you guys know it or not, even though we can't see it yet because we haven't begun to spiritualize, there are halos around each of our heads right now. Right now. We can't see them. They're there right now. Now that I've told you this, go forth and act accordingly. Be serious Christians. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to